Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to today's seminar on the complex traceability of leather supply chain. I'm Jessie, your moderator today. When we think about the traceability in the leather supply chain, recently a hot region is Brazil. Brazil is the world's top 2 leather producing and exporting country. Also a region that sustainable practice, initiatives, and certifications have been developed over decades. Last year, the new European Union Deforestation-Free Regulation, EUDR, has been acted. Though the main focus of the legislation is on other commodities, though leather is never the primary reason for cattle farming, the legislation does bring some impact to leather production and raise higher attention again on the traceability in the leather supply chain. With this context, there seems to be a growing tendency of brands divesting from high-risk countries and regions like Brazil. It's understandable, but it's very likely not a good long-term solution to drive positive changes. Needlessly to mention that there are quite a few effective initiatives, practices, and tools developed in the past decade to improve traceability and transparency in the industry. And when we talk about traceability in the leather supply chain, the interesting fact of leather is it's a commodity coming from food industry and get into the fashion industry as a material. And that makes the supply chain is very, very long and adds layers upon layers of complexity to the traceability more than other textile and footwear materials. In fact, if we boil down those topics, no matter it's about sustainable production in the leather supply chain, or it's about traceability and transparency on how skins and hides were sourced and processed, or it's about driving positive changes in fighting against the deforestation, boiling down those topics, we will find out we're talking about data. It's about data. Data collecting, reporting, verifying, sharing, and analyzing. We need the data to build transparency and traceability. And to do that, we need to understand the complicated landscape of the upstream, the challenges there, and the efforts have been made by producers. Collaboration, of course, is the key. And exchanging knowledge is the essential to build that collaboration. And the essential of the essential is to have manufacturers' perspectives and understand their work and the challenges in building traceability in the supply chain. Before I move to the next step, we prepared a multiple choice question for everyone. You can find it in the chat box. I can also read it for you. So the question is, what could be the fundamental barrier in building traceability in leather supply chain? It's multiple choice. A, the length of supply chain and complicated processing steps of leather production. B, insufficient data and difficulties of matching the existing databases. C, not enough collaboration. And D, missing information and technical support in using existing data reporting platforms. I'm curious to know your answers, and we will open post in a minute. Now, let me have the honor to invite Kim Sena from JBS Group and Andy from Asia 10 to the stage. Hi, Kim. Hi, Andy. Welcome to the seminar. Kim, would you like to introduce yourself and Andy goes after? Thank you.
Hi, Jessie. First of all, thanks for having me here. And hi for everyone in the audience. So I currently serve as Sustainability Director for JBS Colruyt, which is the leather branch of JBS's operation. JBS is a broader food company, operates globally in different geographies. And here at the leather business, I'm working both in the externalities of the business within the tanneries itself, and the tanneries themselves, such as the chemistry we use, reducing the chemistry, optimizing processes and all that. But more and more importantly, on the traceability, supply chain monitoring, and connection between the different links of the supply chain. So making sure we connect, and I see this in the question here, right? The alternative C, the option is not enough collaboration. So trying to enable collaboration between the different tiers in the supply chain. So both understanding better what do the customers and whoever's using leather downstream needs and sees for the sustainability of the material, but connecting this to the most important people in the supply chain, which are the farmers that are connected to the soil, that are working hard and generating food, and indirectly, in this case, leather. So connecting to more sustainable practices. This is, in general, the review of what I do.
Thank you, Kim. And Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jesse, for inviting me. And hi, everybody. My name is Andy Pleekman, and I've been a tanner for over 50 years. And the last 34 years, I've been in China, in a tannery in South China. And for the past 3 years, have a finishing plant in Vietnam. And we make between 2.5, 3 million feet a month. And we tan cowhide, goat skin, splits, and JBS is a very important supplier of ours. And I have been working with JBS for the last 15, 20 years. You know, it is important to me. Sustainability is our #1 focus today. And my job really is the future of the leather business and the future of Asia Tan, and working to make it a sustainable future.
Thank you, Andy. That's a very interesting introduction. I think we will come back to that in a few minutes. And now I saw the post, and most of people choose B, insufficient data and the difficulties to use the existing database as the fundamental barrier in building traceability. Kim, I'm curious to have your perspective on our topic today and the thoughts of the post. I will hand over the microphone to you, Kim.
Okay, Jesse, very interesting results. And I guess all the responses are right in some way. And it's true, insufficient data, or more importantly, access to data is definitely a core challenge. And my personal opinion, also alternative C, lack of collaboration is very big part of the problem as well. Jesse, shall I start sharing a few thoughts with the help of some slides already?
Sure. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Conscious that the audience varies a lot in terms of knowledge on the topic, I chose to bring some basic information, and I hope you're seeing my screen. Some basic information to kind of set the stage on what are the mechanisms and the tools for traceability of the cattle supply chain in Brazil and how it connects to leather. And here, as I said, I'll be focusing on Brazil because of the focus of the online seminar. So here are a few tools. So back in 1934, there was the creation of the GTA in Brazil. The GTA is a document which was then created with the sanitary purpose. At that point, BSE, foot and mouth disease, so monitoring, avoiding sanitary spread of diseases in the cattle herd in Brazil. And what it does is it mainly determines whenever a cattle, a horse, a cow, a horse, or any other animal is moving from one place to the other, it's mandatory for the farmer to issue this GTA, and this GTA has to follow the herd or the single animal along the whole journey. If the farmer is found not to have it, he's fined, right? So it's a mandatory document, and it states the amount of animals, where they leaving from, where they heading to, and other descriptive information such as the age of the animal, the species, and all that. Then in 81, but at that point, again, as I said, it was only for sanitary purposes. Then in 81, a law was created that first determined liability for farmers who didn't respect the environments around them. So it was only then that this was first discussed. And in 88, another important piece of the puzzle came to existence, which was the PRODES data set, which is a data set that is controlled or governed by satellites, satellite imagery, and thus calculates for cumulative deforestation. And back in 88, only looking at the Brazilian Amazon biome, and in the end, calculating the gross annual deforestation. And it has a high resolution, and it's the tool that up to this date is used to monitor deforestation in the Amazon. And only in 2015, it was made available for all the other biomes, which is now the case for Brazil. In 95, the GTA was modernized, and also made harmonized between states, started to be harmonized between states. And only in 2002, and actually made effective in 2006, the SysBOV individual animal tagging system that mirrors the way Europe does their individual animal tagging system was made available and came to existence in Brazil from a demand of enabling some specific herds for export to Europe. And that's how it works until today. Animals to be exported to Europe, they are SysBOV traced. Here, confusion that usually happens, this doesn't mean they're traced back to their birth. They're traced only 3 months before their processing in the meat packing plant, because again, this was created not for environmental purposes, but for sanitary purposes. The whole traceability system was individual animal traceability system was then harmonized in 2006 under the OESA, which is now looking at it nationally. But this is perhaps the most important part here, the Brazilian Forest Code. It was a law that was created in 2009, but came into force in 2012. And it gave the proper terms or the proper definitions on what were the limits of how a farmer could deal with his land in terms of protection of permanent protection areas, of forests, and of native vegetation in general. And in 2019, it was created the Beef on Track Protocol. Beef on Track Protocol, I'll explain here in the next slide after this one. It is a harmonization of the rules to monitor sourcing criteria of cattle in the Brazilian Amazon. So a quick word on the PRODES. Here is a picture, as I said, back in 88 for the Amazon biome, in 2015 for all the other biomes. And it's a publicly available data set that anyone can use, and it's used in several different segments and industries to monitor land use change or deforestation in the different biomes. It's free to use. One can get an API and gather this information automatically and use it for their supply chain monitoring. Beef on Track Protocol, as I said, it's a book, it's a handbook, I could put it this way, which clearly defines rules. And this is really important because if the rules are not clearly defined, and there are more than 40 meat packers in the Amazon region itself, then this flexibility in rules can make supply chain monitoring really have no results. Because if one meat packer has one rule, the other has another one, same cattle could go, a cattle will never be effectively blocked from entering the supply chain. So under this protocol, one can make sure that everyone's working under the same rules. And the Public Prosecutor's Office in Brazil does use these rules, and they were part of the creation of this protocol to enforce the terms of adjustment of conduct and other ways to either fine meat packers or monitor the effectiveness of their supply chain monitoring. So in here, there's a distinction between supply chain monitoring and traceability, but here, this is the core, the basis of how we look at the lands and what rules we use to monitor that As I said, when the Brazilian Forest Code was created, it determined how to look at the land tenure and preservation of the areas of the farm. But it also defined other things, such as legal reserve. We're seeing here in the bottom of the map, RL, so a part of the farm that a farmer cannot touch, minimum threshold that he has to respect. It varies in different biomes, but he, even if he has a legal authorization to clear a part of the farm, he will never be able to touch this farm, which he has defined with GPS coordinates in the CAR system, which is called SysCAR. It also determines other things such as riverbeds cannot be touched, and there are also areas of restricted use. But most importantly for what we are discussing here, also the perimeter of. So this is something that we have very well established in Brazil. It has improvement opportunities, of course, in terms of the validation of all these cars, because there's multiple thousand cars in Brazil, million actually. But it's all farms that do supply to serious meat packers. They are required to have their GPS coordinates set. And this is what also enables the monitoring and the traceability of the supply chain. This is just a picture of how it does look. This is a picture of our company system, but other big meat packers, they will have similar systems with tools provided by similar service providers that daily they are making it available to navigate, to look at the farms, to overlap with the different sourcing criteria, such as the PRODES data set that I just mentioned, but not limited to that, slave analogous labor data sets, indigenous lands, and other criteria such as that. Another important baseline information for Brazilian cattle ranching system is the fact that it's fragmented. Due to mainly cash flow reasons, there are some farmers, as we see here in the bottom of the screen, that are fully integrated. So they breed, rear, and fatten, and then sell to the meat packer. But there are several others that they are fragmented. So perhaps they do fattening and rearing, but they source from a breeding farm. Or they just do only a piece of that puzzle, and there are perhaps 2, 3, sometimes 4 farmers involved in the supply chain. And this is what brings a big part of the complexity to traceability, because monitoring the dark blue here, so the direct supply to the farm, to the meat packer, is something that the big meat packers, they have already wrapped their heads around. They have already strong systems that do allow for this monitoring. What's now the gap and the opportunity to improve traceability and really totally disconnect deforestation from cattle ranching is the possibility to have visibility on these upstream tiers of the value chain. Another core concept I wanted to bring after this realization that the supply chain is fragmented is one exercise. So let's say a farm A has animals individually tagged and it sells cattle to farm B. But let's think from the meat packer standpoint. Let's say that they're sourcing from farm B and they don't know where the animal's coming from. Individual animal tagging is not the penicillin and it's not the silver bullet at all, because it has to be connected to cattle transit. And this is why the GTA is such an important piece of the puzzle, because it allows one to connect the cow or the herd to the upstream farms. Only with the individual animal tagging, that wouldn't be possible. And I'll bring here this exercise. So say one has the car, so the limits of the farm and the GTA. It's possible to have visibility on cattle transit. So knowing where it came from, and if it came, if you have access to all GTAs, you would be able to look at the farm and see if it had, for example, deforested or not. But it wouldn't be able to segregate animals compliant from uncompliant animals within a single farm. Alternatively, if you have CAR and the tag, you are able to segregate animals, but you cannot know where the animals came from. And if you have the 3 of them together, you are then able to have both. So this is an important concept I like to bring, because some people usually have the perspective, that the understanding that with the tag, everything's solved, but it's not. It has to be connected to animal transit. And I believe this is a really important concept. So effectively, in the end, what companies will do is they will have policies and they will use protocols such as the DB contract to set the ground rules to establish and to monitor the supply chain. Here I'm giving you one example of the criteria that my company works with. This can vary between different companies. And here I'll start wrapping up. I'll just bring some images of how this effectively works. So in case of conservation units, I have a farm here in purple and a conservation unit in green. If they are overlapped, this farmer will be blocked because of non-compliance with the criteria. In this case here, indigenous lands overlap, same thing, it will be blocked. And deforestation. So here we're seeing the farm in purple, deforestation in red. Then blocked. Due to time reasons, I won't show a GIF here. I would like to bring on how this works on the computer. I'm sorry for this. I'll skip this. It's quite interesting. I'll perhaps make it available later on, but to display on how this system effectively works from the sustainability professional looking and monitoring the farms. Here, I'd just like to share a few words on how this translates to the hides. So the information on the farms, they're physically stamped to the hides as soon as they get to the tannery, so that it connects to the ERP information of the meat packer, and one is able to connect the farms that the meat packer sourced from a specific date. And in our case of our company, we have this openly available in a public website where one can, with the access of a piece of leather, they can type this information in and immediately get the information of what farms the meat packer source from that specific date. This will vary. Other companies have similar or not solutions such as this one. And here in programs of single farm identification and full supply chain verification, which I didn't bring here, but now we have in place a protocol which allows for tracing the cattle back to the bird farm. It's unfortunately not scalable today due to the lack of incentives to farmers because this is voluntary. So of bringing them their interest through the system. This is a discussion that's now in place, talking to brands and making sure we get incentives. We can calculate and enable incentives back to the farmer. But what we do is we tag the hides at the meat packing facility, and we include additional codes in the traceability stamp so that one can have the single supply chain configuration of that specific, where that specific animal came from. This is what I had for now. Sorry if I went a little bit above the time. I'll be here for any questions.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for your sharing. It's really interesting. I think you help us to grasp a broader picture of traceability and the challenges. And I noticed that traceability is not just about where the materials come and go. It's also about tracking the animal situations when it was first built in 1930. And that could be used today to be to have a piece of puzzle, to have the full information chain of the traceability today. And also interesting to see that different level of traceability has been developed with Tanbin. At first, it's about the animal's situation. And then gradually, like today, it's about anti-deforestation. And also I noticed we use lots of satellite images in developing those tools, and that's really helpful. And I like what you mentioned in your sharing that makes me think we don't just need collaborations within the leather industry, we also need collaborations between the food industry and the fashion industry. Like you mentioned, beef track. Actually, if we want to have traceability on the farm level, we talk about traceability contributed by meat packers, by cattle farmers. So, and then we need a mutual recognition of protocols. As you mentioned, if one cattle farm use this standard and the other one use other standard, and it will be very difficult to have a complete data chain. So it's really helping us to understand and realize the landscape of traceability. And Andy, would you like to add something to Kim's sharing?
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple things, and I hope, Kim, it's okay what I say. You know, I don't think people understand how complex the supply chain is in Brazil. You know, JBS has 70,000 farms in their database, and any one year they slaughter, and that's just the farms that fatten, you know, that sell directly for slaughter, 25,000 farms. You know, you're talking about unbelievable variables, you know, that we're responsible to control. You know, there's over 200 million 200,000, 300,000 farms in Brazil.
That's a very interesting, it's a very important reminder here to say that JBS has capacity of having this database, where it's probably not the case for everyone, and aware of the numbers of farms and the number of slaughterhouses and the scale of collecting the data in a unified format, let's say, and then centralize that for sharing to build up the traceability. So that's a very important reminder here. And thank you, Kim, for your sharing. And Andy, would you like to, would you like to first briefly introduce your company and then share your perspective on this topic, on the traceability?
Okay. You know, I've been a tanner in China for 32 years. And, you know, I joined LWG, I guess, you know, soon after they were formed. And, you know, it made me aware of how bad a job I was doing. I never measured energy. I never measured water. You know, it was all about the leather and not about the process. And I learned very quickly what a fool I've been. So I've spent the last 20 years constantly trying to improve, constantly through simplification, through reduction, through optimization, and through traceability. And I got very involved with JBS because, you know, at the meeting in 2009, everybody attacked Brazil and Brazilian tanners. And to me, if you find something is wrong, you've got a responsibility to correct it. So I've been very involved with JBS, you know, trying to improve the system, to be responsible, to help them be responsible. So, you know, I know a lot about traceability and sustainability. You know, what I did, and I'm not exactly proud of everything I've done. You know, I don't believe in cancel culture. If you're going to change, you know, help this world change, you have to get involved, and canceling is not involvement. So, you know, what I've done with JBS is I source outside the Amazon biome. So 100% of my leather come from 1.5 wet blue factories. So I have complete control over my supply chain.
Andy, I totally agree with you. As I mentioned in the opening, that divesting from high-risk regions or countries, no matter listed in the legislation or listed in anywhere else, divesting from those places is not a good long-term solution. It doesn't help to drive positive changes. So I'd like to have a clarified question here. When you work with JBS Group and when you work in your own business to build up traceability, are we actually talking about documented traceability and physical traceability? And if you could share more with us, especially for people not very familiar with this part, like physical traceability would be the marks on the animal and so on. So would you like to share something about that?
You know, what I've done and what I recommend everybody to do, you know, is, you know, I tell people you know, and really this is not 100% my own quote, but you know, I was a pollution plant with a tannery, not a tannery with a pollution plant. You know, today I'm supply chain management and not just a tannery. You know, and you know, people will only change if you engage. And I have engaged all the way down the supply chain. And, you know, I'm a small, you know, in the world of JBS, in the world of leather, you know, I'm only as strong as I allow myself to be. So I never give up. You know, so I visit 3 times a year. We check, and every shipment we get, every hide is stamped, and we check on their website to make sure they all come from where they say they came from. And then I visit 3 or 4 times a year. We're working now on stamping to the farms. But, you know, nothing happens unless you get involved. Change doesn't happen by itself. You know, so when we receive the leather, we select batches and check with their website. Then we identify throughout the tannery, through our batch system, the hide source. And when we ship to the shoe factories, we give them, you know, the date, our lot number, and they can come back to us and we can tell them exactly what slaughterhouse, what group of farms.
Thank you, Andy. That's I noticed something very interesting. You talk about engage, that you do spend time to go into the site to build up this engagement with slaughterhouses, with your tier up partners, basically, and also probably with tier down partners as well. So I have a question here. Could be interesting that, do you ever encounter a challenge of related to commercially sensitive information required in traceability? For instance, when you deal with your tier up partners like slaughterhouses, you might need them to share with you some commercially sensitive information. And when you deal with your tier down partners, you might need to share some commercially sensitive information with them as well. Do you ever have those challenges? And if yes, how do you manage it?
You know, I really don't.
Oh, that's interesting.
The biggest challenge is change takes time.
So the biggest challenge is?
The change takes time. You know, when I go and I need more information or I need more transparency, you know, it's not a question of private information. You know, in the end, it's a dead animal skin. You know, I'm not, you know, the farms, I visit farms. You know, it is supply chain management. One of the things that I learned, we were the first ones with JBS to do an LCA. And it became quite obvious that 50, 60, 70% of the LCA is the cow. So if I'm going to be sustainable in the future, you know, I have to start getting involved with farms. So with JBS, I am involved with farms. And I have never run into anybody that didn't want to share information.
That is really good to know. That from what I understand, when you invest time and energy into having a relationship with slaughterhouses, with farms, you don't have this challenge, you don't have this problem. So a real collaboration built up on time and the time you invested and the relationship you built. That's a good point. I think just now when I listened to you, I noticed for you, seems traceability is not just about going against the deforestation. Traceability is also about building up sustainable activities and reducing carbon footprint, as I remembered you mentioned somewhere. Do you want to share a bit more about that?
You know, I think, you know, because of the LCA, because the weight of the cattle, you know, it is going to be extremely important to trace back to farms. And because the impact is the cow and the raising of the cow and the slaughter age of the cow and the quality and condition of the soil. So farming has to change to improve the impact of the carbon footprint. So traceability to me is not only about deforestation, it's going to become, tracing back the carbon footprint of individual farms.
I think
And what I'm working with the JBS is to do an LCA on a rotational farming method with livestock, okay, to prove the sequestering of carbon.
Are you actually saying if we could have a well-established traceability system, we can use it not just to anti-deforestation, but we could also use it to reduce carbon footprint and
absolutely. That's what I'm doing, Jess.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point to have this broader picture of why it's necessary to have a well-established traceability system. And the fundamental thing we need to do is to really invest the time and energy in building this engagement with farms and slaughterhouses. That's thank you, Andy. And Kim, would you like to add something more to Andy's sharing?
Well, on this last point, I believe this is a core. It's a core shift in perspective and in paradigm, right? It's not only about looking at how to avoid what we want to avoid, but different from other supply chains, we are talking about land, soil, and life, directly or indirectly. So making sure we understand, respect these processes, and find the proper ways to promote more sustainable food systems, we should invest time in it, because when we look specifically about to carbon, we have several ways of capturing carbon around the world, but only the soil-related solutions, they can enable for also other positive collateral effects, such as improve the biodiversity in the region, or the health of the soil itself, avoid desertification and all that. So we should really, as Andy mentioned, we are doing more and more is on working with academia, working with science to understand this dynamics and how we can help farmers that, because in the end, the farmers do want to do the right thing, all of them, right? We do have in specific territories people that are invading the forest and deforesting, but these are not farmers. These are criminals in the end. When we talk about farmers, they want to have healthier farms, more productive, feed their families, feed the people of the world, make some money in the end. But in the end, they want to do what's best for them and for their farms. So wherever we can help to guide this and to determine the way to go, I think we as supply chains should engage.
I totally agree with you. I saw someone, Elk, posted some comments and a question in the chat box. Would you like to respond to that? Kim
Yes.
and Andy. Okay, then, yeah, please go ahead, Kim.
Okay, Elke, thanks for the question. Is the problem enforce existing laws? In a way, yes. So that's command and control, right? So it's police, army, environmental police, it's federal police. So, and this is a big challenge. This is, and sometimes of the Brazilian history worked better, sometimes worse. So at some point, if you look at the deforestation graphs, it did decrease a lot. Back in 2012, it did achieve some targets set for minimal deforestation, not zero at that point. So command and control, it did work best at some point in the past, but it cannot be seen as the single problem or as the single solution for that matter, because it's a massive territory. But first of all, yes, better command and control would help. But the gaps, they also lie in access to data. So the fact that meat packers, for instance, not all of them monitor their direct suppliers, it's a problem because there's leakage. So leveling the playing field on everyone looking at their direct suppliers in the same way would be very impactful. But also the fact that the data of the upstream farmers, as I said, of considering the fragmented supply chain, considering that this data is not made publicly available, or that meat packers don't have access to that information, although it seems like dumb, if anything, or counterintuitive, that's the fact. So there's no access to that piece of information unless the farmers voluntarily disclose them due to data protection laws. This is another big piece of the problem. So solving that, and that involves several aspects from politics to other factors. This would change a lot, enabling the necessary data and information of traceability for the meat packers who are trying to do this the right thing, which are not a few, that they could do it. So I would highlight these two things. Yes, command and control, but also access to data on the upstream farms.
Access to data for the upstream suppliers like farmers. Is there, any platforms they could use, or it's just there's no unified platform or no easy channels for them to access data or to report data?
So far, there's none at all. And that's the problem, if I could put it that way. But there are discussions in that sense. So, for instance, the Ministry of Agriculture, and that's how I believe that civil society plays a crucial role in different legislations, although sometimes they are not written the best way they could, and they are not tailored to have the most positive impact. The engagement of civil society is positive because it pushes or pulls for the better, right? So the Ministry of Agriculture recently, they announced the Agro Brazil Plus platform, where it is making enabling or making available this piece of information upstream. It's not available yet. No one knows when it will be, but it's now under discussion more and more that although for some specific groups, it might not be interesting to share, disclose information of their upstream farms for whatever reason, for the civil society in general, it is. So it's building up, if I could say, these platforms. And I really hope that in the near future, we will have this information disclosed and available for supply chain monitoring traceability purposes.
Yeah, and I can see if we could have that system, it doesn't just benefit fashion industry, it also benefit food industry, actually benefit food industry more. After all, leather and the skin, it's, I think, just 3% of the economic value of the whole cattle. So if we could have that system, it will benefit agriculture industry, well, food industry a lot more. So, Andy, would you like to respond to this comment and question in the chat box? That yeah,
I agree with Kim, but I don't think it can be solved without government, period. These are criminals. It is impossible to stop this without the government. So, of course, I put pressure on JBS, worries day and night about the publicity and managing the supply chain. But the criminality, JBS can't stop, I can't stop. The only thing I decided to do was, if I can't stop this without the government, then I can be involved in reforestation. So, as a company, we're very involved in reforesting parts of Brazil. So I can't stop deforestation, but I certainly can contribute to reforestation.
That's a very important reminder here to say to address anti-deforestation, we need to see the bigger picture that there are lots of there are lots of factors to drive deforestation first. And the second, there are also lots of players in the fighting against deforestation. And we needed to notice each factor, that if we just rely on leather producers, let's say, in Brazil to fight against the deforestation, it's not just unrealistic, it's also a bit unfair, as it's a picture needs every player to do the job and to contribute to that issue, to address that issue. So talking about that, Kim, would you like to share a bit more about the data sharing and especially data sharing between different stakeholders in the leather supply chain, the challenges and also the efforts have been done?
Sure. So share, first of all, the link between meat packers and tanners. We live in a very specific case that we are the same company, so it's full data sharing, but it's not the usual case. And the access to the hides, it's very competitive in between tanners, so they don't have effective leverage to negotiate, to demand this supplier-customer relationship as we know it. It's not there between meat packers and tanneries. So they are usually not in a position to demand high levels of information. They really can live with whatever the meat packers want to disclose in the end. So that's one of the challenges, looking at the broader supply chain that is there. You mentioned the 3%. With updated data, it's actually around or below 1%. So the hides represent less than 1% of the economic value of different products of the meat packer. And this just reinforces the fact that they don't have much leverage at all. They cannot really demand much. And this is where I think, as you said, it's a bit unfair usually to use the lens that, hey, tanner is on you, solve this whole discussion, when it really can only be solved if meat packers, but as Andy said, outside the supply chain links, the government or the public forces really engage. On access to data downstream from the tannery, this is, I guess, there are several solutions now in place. So hides are individually stamped. The tanneries do their best to disclose this information. So when they say do their best, it's really make it as openly available as they can to their customers, to make, I don't know, a shoemaker or a sofa maker be able to connect this information to their products. So I believe in that sense, this has evolved a lot, both together with invoices or pallet numbers. The information is sent together with them, CSV files, so both digitally or physically, this information is made available downstream. There's no harmonization on how each company uses. All of them have their own processes, but in the end, this information is already there. So I think this, I mentioned before, right? So the information between the farms is the big gap, but talking about tanneries, they are not integrated to meat packers. Also having harmonized information and open access to information is a gap that's still a challenge for them.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for mentioning according to the updated data, that the economic value, the leather, just to take 1% or even less than 1% of the economic value of the whole cattle. I think that makes lots of sense to help people to see the bigger picture, to know that. And of course, we needed to also to realize, because of the climate change, because of all those environmental crises. So nowadays, deforestation and climate-related topics are gain lots of attention, and probably that's also when we talk about traceability today in leather supply chain, we naturally link it to deforestation. But actually, traceability at the first place, it should, as we mentioned before, a well-established system could help for serve multiple purpose, not just anti-deforestation, but also sustainable production and other purpose. And Andy, I think you mentioned before that the business of Asia10 actually include operations in Vietnam, Italy, and China as well. China is the top one leather producing and production company. So when we think about traceability, if we look at on the global level, what would be challenges in those places, in those regions?
Okay, I'm not in Italy. JBS is in Italy. I'm in
Right.
Vietnam and China. I'm not sure, Jesse, I understand the question.
As a tannery, when you have operations in Brazil, China, and Vietnam, do you have same challenges of traceability, for instance, or to reach the requirement?
It's the same system. Traceability is traceability. So we have a policy in which we give to our suppliers where they have to stamp it and sign it and agree to it. And then we go ourselves and verify that they are doing it. And with JBS, because it's a internet-based system, I can check every shipment. But my other suppliers, I go 2-3 times a year to verify. But, traceability is traceability. It's got to work for everything. What is different is, Brazil is very sophisticated because it's it's an industrialized industry. But on goat and on splits, I have other problems because it's not the same.
If you go 3 times through the upstream suppliers, what would you suggest to other tanneries if they don't have that capacity to go to their upstream farms or upstream partners to do the same as what you did?
I made it, I don't know what capacity means, whether it's money or whether it's mindset. Kim says, and it's true, that leather is 1% of the value of the cow, but it's 100% of my value. And it's my business, and it's my responsibility. And if it's my business and my responsibility, I do it. And does it cost me in time and money and people? It does. But, that's my job. To me, this is our job.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for sharing that. It answers lots of questions and it answers lots of challenges we have today, actually. It's about commitment. It's about responsibility. It's about be responsible to what you produce and what you're committed to. And Kim, yes, JBS has operations in Italy and also other countries. What would you think if you look at it globally, not just Brazil? What would be the challenge to have the traceability? Or is there no challenge? It's the same?
No, so the challenges are totally different because as I described, for instance, the georeferencing of the farms is something that's openly available in Brazil. It's not the same for other countries such as, Argentina or United States or Australia. There are some benefits or there are some pieces of the puzzle that are better in other countries than in Brazil, such as the individual animal tagging system in Uruguay or Australia are there enforced in place and not in Brazil. So they're totally different challenges, problems, and solutions. What I can say is that the territory visualization or access, visibility to the territory it's a lot more mature in Brazil than elsewhere. And when we think about traceability, when we look at other countries, it's a way more embryonary. The problem is a lot bigger, I would say, because of, and I think it's natural, right? Because of how the questions have came first for Brazil due to its massive natural vegetation preserved, and everyone wants to keep it preserved. It's just natural that it started first. But yeah, I would say in general, there are bigger challenges in other geographies, both because of the technologies in place, and in some countries for cultural reasons, for religious reasons, or the way cattle are raised. So yeah, it varies a lot, and it needs a specific work for each territory, each geography.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for your very detailed explanation here. And I just want to have a quick reminder here that we have a feedback link will be posted in the chat box. We encourage and welcome everyone to give us the review on today's seminar. We will take a moment, like 3 minutes, before moving on to the next session. Before I move on to the next session, I'd like to remind everyone again, we greatly value your feedback and review on our seminar. So please don't forget to read the seminar in the link posted in the chat box. And I noticed that Matthias posted a comment in the chat box about a standard that developed a global standard for traceability in the garment and the leather sector. And this work will be extended to the beef and hide sectors next year. So that just reminded me. Thank you, Matthias, for posting this information. We can come back to that in a minute. And now that just reminded me about the collaborations. So I think, and you mentioned you work with JBS Group a lot, and I'm curious to know if you work a lot with other organizations as well, especially civil organizations on the collaboration, and if you could share with us some of the examples.
You know, work very closely with brands. Okay, and I'm very involved with the sustainable people in the brands because it is a matter of education. It's a matter, I bring brands to Brazil to visit slaughterhouses, to visit the factory, to visit farms. You know, it's the more transparent the supply chain is to everybody, the easier it is, I think, to get involved and to solve problems. Okay, and you know, with JBS, you know, I'm dealing directly with a meat company, but in other countries and other raw materials, I'm going in 2 weeks to visit Southeast Asia, to visit slaughterhouses on my own, you know, with my supplier. I'm going to visit farms on my own with my supplier. You know, it to me, it is important. I'm the leather guy, right? I should know these things, and I should have known them a long time ago. You know, so I am in everything I buy, it's I see first. You know, and what I found when I do this, you know, because nobody's ever done it before, yes, people, you know, are reluctant to share and want to know why I'm there. And you know, it starts a little adversarial, but when they see that I take what they do as important, they open up. I mean, I've never met anybody that's pushed back. In the beginning, they push a little, but the minute they see that I care, they care.
That's really good to hear. It's very, I would say, cheering up. And my takeaway would be...
Does that answer your question?
I think my takeaway would be transparency is about knowing your business, I think. Knowing your business on each level and each step. That's why you invest so much time and energy going to visit slaughterhouse, and even farms. So yes, you have the transparency of your business because you know your business on each step. And that, I think that also makes your, your partnership to the brands so unique, so valuable, and so irreplaceable, I would say. But I think I'm still curious about the collaborations with other organizations, let's say, for instance, NGOs or civil organizations, especially on standards making or on some norms or all those kind of things. So I think that could be interesting for our audience too. And Kim, would you like to share some examples of such collaborations?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's both at the farm level and on the discussion on deforestation. There are several organizations that are looking at the problem from different angles. So making sure everyone has access to the same information, that we're talking about the same thing, that we have clear goals, that they really understand what are the real challenges is part of our job. So talking to, I won't name them here, but there are multiple institutions that are looking at land use change and deforestation. There are some civil society organizations that are funded to help and to support and to fund their way through zero deforestation, right? So making sure we are talking to all of them is, I mean, it's basic. If you're not doing that, you are really alienated in the end because you're, of course, you can do your own thing and you should, right? Action is more important than lobby or politics or chit chat in the end. But I really believe that we should be aligned. We should be addressing the real root causes, the real problems, and we only do that through conversation and alignment. And in the leather sector, there are a few organizations that are doing that. They are more and more looking at the deforestation topic. To name perhaps the most relevant one, it's LWG, the Leather Working Group, which came to existence harmonizing water impact and energy impact and the impact of chemicals in tanneries, but now are also looking at traceability, chain of custody, and deforestation for that matter. So making sure we are in those discussions, part of the working groups, part of the discussion tables is, I mean, whenever that happens, we are there because it's, if anything, it's an opportunity to educate and be educated on what everyone's doing so we cannot miss those chances.
Thank you, Kim. And from what I hear, it just gives me an impression that I'm curious for one thing, that we talk about traceabilities today, and we mostly talk about tracking animals on, from the meat packers side and on the farm level, on the slaughterhouse level. And as we also mentioned, leather is just probably lower than 1% of the economic value of the whole cattle. So would you say that leather producers shall or could join more to have a collective voices, to have some influence on the food industry? Or let's say, do you ever participate in public consultation or initiatives launched by food industry? Would that helps more the fashion industry to address the issues, to have a better established traceability system?
Well, I see that food and clothing, apparel are two completely different things, right? They have different impacts in our subconscious as humans, right? When we have a handbag or a shoe, we perhaps are using it daily. We have a personal connection to that brand and to the ethos, what it represents. Well, with food is a bit different, right? It's food on the plate. It's being fed and feeding our family. So the dynamics are very different. And I guess the supply chain aspects also make it very different, right? The leather, I mean, it's a fact that it does have this limited leverage. But this being said, because of what I mentioned previously on the cultural aspect and on how brands are facing the world, are facing people, are sharing messages, are saying things to people in a different way. I think brands and leather have a whole different opportunity in building positive change, right? In engaging, if it's not only in a, as we said, in a request way or in a supplier customer traditional way, it's more than anything to be creative, to build up and develop more sustainable practices and push them and sometimes incentivize them in different ways. And I see that this is happening more and more. But yeah, this, I think that the leather can play a role of leadership in that sense because of this cultural aspect it does have in society, that materials and fashion have in society. So engaging in this discussion, inviting, right? So a solution will not come alone from leather, but it can be led by leather. And this I would extrapolate to cotton or other natural fiber, right? Wool. I guess the same applies to them. I think the fibers have an opportunity to be leaders in developing and creating and engaging for positive solutions.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, that's a very important reminder here that it's a big clarification for me as well, that to say we see cattle as how to say, food industry and fashion industry have different norms, have different procedures and different standards, different process, different everything. And also consumers have different approaches, different attachment to the two things. We shouldn't mix them. But on that note, we are saying, I think, leather producers do have some leverage power here to drive the positive changes, and the leather producers do have responsibilities and capable of doing something here. As Andy mentioned before, that transparency is actually just about knowing your business on each level and on each step, and you have responsibility of what you produce, of course. So it's not just about traceability on anti-deforestation. It's also about sustainable practice, ethical practice. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I noticed we have a few minutes left here. So Andy, if you have a chance to share something with fellow leather manufacturers from Asia, what would you share with them? Do you have any final words to share with fellow manufacturers? Tanneries.
Yeah, just do it. Whether we like it or not, the future is supply chain management. And we have to get involved. Is it fair? No. But is it necessary? Yes.
I like that. The future is about supply chain management. Maybe it's not fair that this job falls on the manufacturers, but it's necessary to do it. And somehow, yes, there are some leverage power that can do it. And Kim, what would you like to share with fellow manufacturers, like leather manufacturers from Asia, for instance, or Europe?
Yeah, I think there's a different from other supply chains. We haven't done yet any pre-competitive collaboration, right? It's always based on competition or customer supplier relationships. I think we have the opportunity for working together for a better supply chain, working with the main geographies and developing not only standards, but actions together. It cannot be perhaps JBS and AJ10 doing their thing, someone else doing a completely different thing. The impact of that is totally mitigated as compared to if we were all working together. So I think we have this opportunity. I think leather as a natural fiber, as a byproduct of animal protein industry, as a renewable material, it has the opportunity. It is a material of the past, but it can be definitely a very strong material for the future. So, and it's on us to make that happen, right? It's a durable fiber. It's a material that everyone likes to sit on, to touch on. So if we have, if we can work together towards that end and join forces, I really think we should, and I think we're missing that.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. We've covered a lot today, from the complicated landscape of the upstream to the data sharing and information exchanging in terms of traceability. So the challenges of traceability since the laser supply chain are various. For instance, can be geographically, can be different, also on the purchasing and processing steps, complicated. Mixed materials have been traded among different traders and agents and in a centralized warehouse and distributed after. The challenges of traceability in the laser industry also can be developing a collaboration between different stakeholders and developing approaches that people could easily access data and share those data. So I don't think there is a magical system that does everything. But there are some spaces for laser manufacturers to leverage the power to do some to drive some positive changes. As Andy mentioned, that transparency is about knowing your business, and we do need that level of commitment into doing the work to building up this traceability. So we also needed collaborations, not just within the industry, but also cross industries, and the understanding and the knowledge built up that collaboration. And the key is to include manufacturers' perspectives and knowledge into account. So by saying that, we are at the end of our seminar. A big thank you to Kim, and thank you for taking time and get up early to join the seminar. And a big thank you to Andy for sharing your perspective and extend your working hours to join the seminar. And thank you to everyone joining it. Remember to read the seminar, and see you next time.